Connect podcast. Super excited to have you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. Wherever you're watching us on a podcast, on a video, or on a short form content on TikTok, thank you for your time. You know that we make law and the legal stuff easy for you. We basically demystify this, because a lot of people have this fear of dealing with the lawyers. They think that, lawyers are not humans. No, they are humans, right? They're in fact, very helpful people who are willing to help you. That's where we demystify on this podcast, right? So today I'm excited to have Omar Khan with me, who is an immigration lawyer. Welcome to the show, Omar.
Thank you, Ali, and hello and assalamu alaikum to all of your viewers. I'm very happy and excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Omar. So Omar, people who don't know you, right, or they don't know what immigration lawyer does, right? So give us a brief introduction about yourself and about your practice.
For sure. So my name is Umar Khan. I am a lawyer based in Scarborough, Ontario, which is the east end of Toronto. I practice primarily in immigration law with a bit of real estate as well. And really, my background is that I'm a son of immigrant parents who came to Canada from Pakistan. And my dad came when he was pretty young. My mom came after the wedding, but even my grandparents, they came in the early 70s. So they were amongst the first wave of immigrants to come to Pakistan or to come from Pakistan to Canada. And so for me, I've kind of always had that immigrate mindset and kind of seen those experiences firsthand, either through stories or through some of my family members, right? And so educationally, I did my undergraduate degree in law and society. It was a bachelor's of arts with honors. And then I did a master's degree in political science, which is a 1 year program at York as well. And then I obtained my law degree from Western University in London, Ontario. I got my start in sport entertainment law. I used to be an athlete once upon a time. It feels like many, many years ago, which it was. I was a competitive shot putter. And so shot
Ah,
put is that sport you see at the Olympics where people spin around and so I was lucky enough to be third in Canada for a few years, and I was the best in the province. And so I had a really good time with that. But I said, you know what? Why does it have to end here? Why can't I convert this into a profession? And so I was lucky enough to get my start in sport entertainment law. That was also throughout, these COVID times. And although I had a little bit of exposure to immigration law during, my time in working with athletes and entertainers, it wasn't really the bread and butter of what we did.
mm,
I then did real estate, which was booming. It was one of the few industries, as you know, Ali, that was booming through COVID. And so I was lucky enough to get in and learn it and do really well. And I'm still doing that as well. But immigration kind of happened by chance because, a lot of people that you help, they want to know other things that are happening. So, for example, when the foreign buyers ban was announced, that's really what kind of put two and two together for me and said, why
yes.
don't we get back into immigration law and really help from, I'd like to call it a comprehensive or collaborative approach, right? So that's how immigration law happened. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think being an immigrant gives you a very interesting lens over an immigration law, right? You're not just looking at as a lawyer, you're actually looking at as an immigrant who went through the process and your family went through the process yourself. So it's I think it's a very different experience, right? So
Right.
one of the biggest problems, Omar, in the in the immigration law, right, is the daily updates, right? How fast does it change, right? There is it's probably one of the laws which generally has more updates than probably any other kind of other area of law, if I'm not wrong. And today was a major announcement, so there's a collision conference happening, right, in Toronto, maybe one of the biggest tech conferences, and immigration minister made some announcement. So talk about that, right? And talk about any other update if you are aware of in terms of Canadian immigration landscape.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and you hit the nail on the head when you said that immigration law is the area that changes quickly and more often, and I think rightfully so. Right, almost every second day, there's a temporary policy that allows something new to happen. Right, so for
Mm,
example, we have this unfortunate situation with the Indian students. About
yes.
700 plus were facing deportation, and there was a temporary policy that came out to kind of put those things on hold, right, in terms of their deportation. Just the other day, for visitors, right? For example, you can come to Canada, visit, and then apply for a work permit. Of course, there's a lot of misinformation as well, right? So for that program, it's really important to know that it's not just any work permit, it's a closed work permit, meaning an employer in Canada has to be willing to support you. As far as today's announcements, I mean, it's very, very new, very, very fresh. Essentially, what we're doing is moving towards this thing called um, the name escapes me. The nomadic visa. The nomadic visa, right?
Hmm.
There's about
Okay.
50 to 60 countries in the world which
Yeah.
have some type of nomad visa. Essentially, what this amongst, I mean, this is the one announcement to me that's really, really exciting. There's been some
Yeah.
announcements today about the startup visa. There's been some announcements about the H-1B visa, which is for, US who have now kind of been displaced in light of all the recent tech layoffs. There's some avenues that are going to be opening up for STEM professions and direct PR pathways. So, I mean, the nitty gritty of what this all looks like is to be seen. But this nomad visa for me, Ali, is really exciting because it's going to open up another avenue for immigration. And that's really important.
Yeah. So let's go a little bit deep into it. Can you explain, someone who's watching it probably have no idea, and in fact, explain it to me as well. What does nomad visa generally means in terms of international realm, right? And what is Canada trying to do here?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of other countries, what it generally means is if you are employed in any country, then you can then visit that country and continue to work for that employer. Now, every country has its own specifics. I think what Canada is trying to do is invite more talent here quickly because, as you know, there's a labor shortage, right? We have an aging population, we have lower fertility rates. So, I mean, it's a big goal of ours to hit 50 million by 2043, right? We just hit 40 million the other day.
Yeah.
And so, in hopes to get to that target, obviously, we need to open our doors. And one of the ways Canada is doing that is making it more attractive to kind of make it a little bit easier for people in specific pathways to come here and work and then continue to work. And also, then through various exemptions, allow family members to work as well.
Hmm. That's amazing. I think, uh, as you said, that opens up just another whole, stream of opportunity, right? And for people. Um, so let's segue into immigration. For people, it's a dream come true, right? One decision, as your a grandfather or father came to Canada, and you becoming a lawyer in this country, and one decision changed your whole family's trajectory. It's same thing that my dad came to Canada, and that changed my future, my kids future. uh, when there's so much relying on this decision, right? On the other hand, people also face a lot of frauds in this industry. It's a very common occurrence that uh, uh, either agents, lawyers, consultants who are not recognized or registered, right? They're operating in this space. So what is your take on generally overall fraud in this industry and how people can avoid it? Over.
Yeah, I think fraud in any industry is a challenge. On a personal level, feel that some element of fraud will always exist. But I think what we can do to stop it really is to do our due diligence. So, as lawyers, we're regulated by our various law societies. And so we have regulation from the top, but you also internalize that and say, even though after 9 to 5, for example, I'm not a lawyer, but some of those rules still continue to apply to me. And so I kind of have to be mindful that in all of my dealings, including my personal dealings, right? And so on the other side of it, for example, I'm part of the Canadian Bar Association's working group for the Indian
Mhm.
students that were facing deportation. And
Yeah.
one of the things that we came up with was, look, people also have to do their own due diligence. And so, for example, if someone gets as you know, you need an admittance letter from a DLI, which is a designated learning institution. That's the first step in getting a student visa. And you should call the school and call the school
Mhm.
directly. Don't just rely on the person you've paid to help you. If they're telling you got in, that's great. Give them a call and maybe, and it's a great way of building a relationship with the school as well, because you're probably not going to get a chance to meet, your head minister, for example, until you're here in Canada, which might be a few months. Um, so one thing you can really do is equip yourself, and the second thing is speak to a lawyer, right? Speak to a lawyer and say, "Look, I got this letter. Does it look legitimate?" Of course, that's not within the scope of our practice, but depending on
Yeah.
who's doing it, they might be able to help you out and kind of make you aware of the red flags that typically occur, right? Typically, I would say when it's here, take my money and deliver a result, and if someone's giving you 100% guarantee, I would
That's
say look the other way, right? There's no such thing as 100% guarantee.
yeah.
Refusals happen. And if you're in a situation where you have a refusal, consider your options. Are you going to reapply? Do you want the decision to be reconsidered? Do you want a lawyer to undertake a judicial review? It really just depends. But refusals happen. But if
Yeah.
anyone is promising you 100% result in anything and everything, that
Yeah.
should be the first red flag. Yeah.
There should be red flag. No one can promise 100% of the results, because you know what, like, the system doesn't work that way. And I
That's right.
think, like, that's probably one of the biggest red flags. If someone says that they can get you 100% of the results, as Umar said, that just run away from them, right?
Yeah.
So Umar, uh, a lot of young people are watching, right? And they would be thinking, what is the best stream for them, right? Now, putting there are generally different streams we talk about, like, you have your regular immigration streams, then you have your student visas inside, then like, there's a whole, like, startup visa and that side of it too, right?
Right.
So shed some light that so that age impacts your how you come to Canada. So let's
Yes.
say, let's answer this question. If someone is 20, what is the best way for them? Someone is in 30s and 40s, what is the best way for them? And someone is over 40s, what is the best way for them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would hesitate to give like an overarching answer for
Oh,
age each
yes.
of those demographics. But
Yeah.
as you said, depending on your program, your age definitely impacts you, right? So a 20-year-old, I mean, the world is your oyster, right? Would you like to continue your studies? Would you like to work? Would you like to visit?
Mm,
Are you working for a company somewhere already that could help you with the ICT, which is the intra-company transfer? It
yeah.
really just depends, right? Someone who's in their 30s, you could want to further your education, right? It's a harder
Mm,
argument to make, but we have approvals for people who wanted to study a little later in life and they wanted to continue their education, but for whatever reasons, they had family, they had to take a break from their studies in their home country. Really, it depends on who you know as well. And what I mean by
mm,
that is, do you have family in the province that you want to get settled in, right? So when we
yeah.
take a step back and kind of look at the immigration system, of course, there's the student side, which a lot of people don't even need lawyers to do that, right?
Yeah.
But when we talk about the economic pathways, right, does
Mm,
it really depends? Am I trying to find an employer to be connected with that can kind of support me? Am I just going to
mm,
work for any employer? How do
mm,
I want to come to Canada? So generally, as you know, Ali,
mm,
the federal pathway is called the express entry. So federal
yes.
skilled worker, federal skilled
Mm,
trade, and Canadian experience class. And so you
mm,
get a CRS score, which is a comprehensive ranking system. And in the last draw, which was a few weeks ago, the target score is 486. It is
yes.
almost impossible to score
Mm,
486 if you're outside of this sweet spot of
mm,
25 to 30, right? It's
yes.
very, very difficult. And then, if it doesn't work under federal skilled worker or Canadian experience class or federal skilled trade under this express
Mm,
entry, then you kind of have to go through the PNPs, which is the provincial nomination programs, right?
mm,
Some of those PNPs are express entry aligned, meaning you have to
yeah.
sit in the pool, right?
Yeah.
And then apply for a PNP and be invited for your certificate of nomination, which
Yeah.
then you have 45 days to then apply, right?
Yeah.
Or are you in a non-express entry aligned PNP? The challenge with a lot of the PNPs now, they've changed them over the last few months, is that if you
Mhm,
don't have a job offer or if you don't have family in the province with which you're showing intent to live in, it's
mhm.
very, very difficult to qualify. And then
Oh,
they, as you rightfully pointed out, they also base on age because some of
mhm,
them, like Saskatchewan, for example, has its own point grid system where
mm,
you have to see comparatively how strong of a candidate you are,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
when you're out of the federal program, when you're out of the provincial program and you feel like maybe I don't qualify, then you have to shift the discussion to a job offer based program. And it's
Mm,
quite hard, Ali, as you know, it's hard enough to get a job when you're in Canada.
yeah.
Imagine when you're abroad, right? So um, I would say one avenue is to do an exploratory visit,
Yeah.
come to Canada, make networks, and maybe see if you can take advantage of the public policy that's temporarily allowing a visitor to apply for an open work permit. I'm so
Mm.
sorry, a closed work permit,
A close work permit. Yeah.
specifically employer specific, right? It's not just that you
Mm,
can visit Canada and start
mm,
working. You're not authorized to work in Canada until you're either
yes.
subject to an exemption for the LMIA side of things,
Yes.
right? Or if you have
Perfect. I think, can you hear me, Omar bhai? You're
Yes,
here?
Ali, go ahead.
Yes,
Go ahead.
perfect. Okay. So, now, let's take a step more forward, right? We talked about Express Entry, we talked about PNP. Now, let's talk about the business and entrepreneurship programs, okay? And also shed some light on the startup visa program.
Right. So, to be honest with you, I haven't done too many files on that side, right? And it's important, I think, to be honest, not just with your viewers, but it's important always to be honest with clients, right? What I can tell you is that there are these startup streams. They require a bit of startup capital. They require you to be connected with an investor, which is a trusted partner. And those applications I've read have a higher success chance. And under the OINP program, which I'm quite familiar with, there's 9 streams. So under Ontario's provincial nomination program, there's 9 streams, and then the entrepreneur stream is one of those streams,
One of
right?
those
And
streams.
so really, it just kind of depends. I mean, everyone has access these days to internet, and they could read the requirements and kind of bring yourself up to speed on what's required. But generally speaking, it requires a business to be up and running for X amount of time. It requires X amount of startup capital. It requires X amount of investors, and then there's a host of other requirements. But I think the takeaway message for anyone, right, is no matter what program you're applying through, one of the number one reasons of refusal is that there was insufficient documents, whether it's on the student side, if you're using a lawyer, whether it's in an economic pathway, whether it's a startup visa. If the documents are not fully there, then your chance of refusal is quite high,
Quite
right?
high. Yeah, and I think that's why for this the due diligence part, you have the lawyer to provide you to make sure that you have the right documents. You
Right.
have all the documents. Are you telling your best story to the visa officer, whoever the decision maker is, that why are you the perfect fit to come to Canada? And I think that's what makes uh, having leaning upon that lawyer to get this strategic advice, because one decision, as we said, can fundamentally change the outcome. So this segues me into the one more. It's not a immigration stream, but it's kind of like an option people exercise to come to Canada, right? Which is a refugee option, right?
Right.
So shed some light on that, or Umar, refugee option. There's a lot of misconception about refugee option as well. It's
Yeah.
also something people abuse it, or they basically misuse it. So let's shed some light on it, how does the refugee process works, and in what cases you technically qualify for it, right? So.
Right. So I'm always hesitant to opine on areas that I don't practice in, right? So refugee law is its own beast outside of immigration law,
Mm,
both immigration and refugee. So on the
mm,
refugee side of things, I always advise prospects that ask me these questions to go and speak specifically with a refugee lawyer. The Law
yes.
Society of Ontario has a referral list, and you can always feel free to rely on that. So I'd be
Mm,
hesitant to talk about refugees.
okay.
But I would say is, it's always important to know what may or may not work for your specific circumstances and
Mm,
kind of pursue your options. And the best way to do that is to speak to a lawyer who should be honest with you and honest enough to say, look, I don't practice this area. I would be doing you a disservice to take some of your money. And it's better you speak to someone because they're going to be able to do it way more thorough and probably charge you a little bit less because some lawyers bill on a per time basis. And if that's the case, it
mm,
doesn't make sense, right? So I hope I'm not doing your viewers a disservice, but I think it's important to be very, very honest in all of your dealings.
Absolutely. I think you are you are basically providing the right advice as being the subject matter expert, because the right subject matter experts will not talk about the areas which they're not good at or they're not familiar with. So I really appreciate that. So Umar, there's a lot of people who'll be watching today and they probably want to reach out to you, have questions related to immigration law, they're interested in coming to Canada, or they're generally curious, right? So if someone wants to get a hold of you, they want to reach out to you, how they can reach out to you?
I would say LinkedIn is probably the best way. So my name is Umar Khan, Umar, last name Khan. And that's probably the best way. And we can kind of continue the conversation. And I'm happy to connect. And Ali, even if there's viewers out there who are thinking about applying to law school, right, and
Yeah.
kind of don't have lawyers in their family, I'm happy to be of service to them as well. Like my thing really is how can I help as many people as possible, right? Whether it's through helping them buy and sell a house or whether it's or refinancing or whether it's through coming to Canada and exploring your options, it doesn't matter to me. My end game in all of this is how can I use the tools that God has blessed me with to make someone else's life better. And that's really why I'm doing what I'm doing. And at the end of the day, that's what motivates me.
Yeah, that's excellent. Guys, you can find Umar on LinkedIn at Umar Khan, Umar, Umar Khan, Khan. Easy to find, right? Like, if you cannot find Umar on LinkedIn, I think something you're doing something wrong here,
It's
right?
a common name. It's a common name, but yeah, I have a unique face, and so I'm hoping you can find it.
Umar has a unique identifier. That's his face, right? And we'll make sure that the link is posted in the show notes, right? Thank you so much, Umar, for providing this immense, knowledge and information and giving us your time, right? So the most important thing is your time and helping people out because immigration is such an important area, especially people who are looking to change their and their family's life. And as we said, right, one decision can fundamentally change their life, their future generations' life. Thank you so much, Umar.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you very much for your time, and for the viewers as well. Thank you for spending your time and scrolling through. And I'm looking forward to connecting and seeing how we can move the conversation forward.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. This was Umar, the Canadian immigration lawyer. If you are interested in immigration related inquiries, you know who to reach out to and you know who you will get trusted and proper advice. I love what Omar said that his whole goal is to serve. And I really like that part, right? Because he's coming with an intention of serving. So please reach out if you have any questions. I'm sure you will get a really excellent advice from Omar. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll catch you in the next episode. Take care. Bye bye.